What's up, Arch City Poker YouTube? Welcome back to another video. I know we missed a podcast episode last week, been busy with some stuff with the site, but I'm going to show you guys how to build a range in live low stakes poker and how that differs from building a range in theory or against like another elite player, if you will. And to know how and why we build the ranges the way we do for live low stakes poker at Arch City Poker, we need to know, or we need to take a look under the hood at why, or how these guys deviate from the optimal theory, what the optimal theory is, and that's going to better help you exploit and understand. So let's go ahead and take a look at this spot. 2-5 game. Button's going to go ahead and make it 3x, could be 4x, doesn't really matter. And we're going to go ahead and call on the button with 6-5 suit. It could do a little 3-betting here, a little calling. Let's just say we call in this particular instance. And let's say we get a flop of Jack 7-4. So we get a two-tone dynamic texture. How I would start building my range in theory, let's say I was playing somebody that I thought was the same skill level as myself. Like, let's say Tony, the other Arch City Poker instructor, you guys that are, YouTube subscribers for a while now and have been over to the site, you guys know Tony. So, like, let's say Tony was on the button. How would I build my range against him here? Well, let's say we start with a majority of the time a no limit, a lot of checks here. When would I ever consider betting? Probably when I have a pretty large nut advantage. I don't really have that here. Like, I would have 3-bet on the button with, my over pairs, including jacks. So, like, my aces, kings, queens, my pocket jacks to make top set don't really exist here. My ace jack suited, my king jack suited, even some maybe queen jack suited. Like, a lot of those hands are going to 3-bet. Pocket sevens might even do a little bit of 3-betting, so we don't really have like as many of the nutty combos. Typically when that's the case, guys, and we're kind of in this wide versus wide dynamic, like Tony or a good player would be raising on the button pretty wide. I'd be defending pretty wide against 3x. It's a spot that we probably don't want to do a lot of leading. So we check. Tony, being a good player, is going to understand that I'm the kind of player that I'm going to do, a lot of good defending here. Like, I'm going to defend with a nice array of check raises, check calls. I'm going to be really tough to play against even if I'm out of position. So Tony's likely going to bet here. And I would say with a pretty good nut advantage. It's a spot that, let's say, a good player might say, you know what, I do have a nut advantage. I know I'm wider and I can't bet as often, but I can bet probably a little bit larger. So let's say they just go with 20. I'm not saying I've looked at a solver before I've done this, guys. Like, but let's just these are the general thoughts I would have. Like, you're not going to be too far off from what's really correct if you're operating like this in this spot. So let's say Tony bets 20. And I know that, again, because he knows I'm going to play really tough, he's probably going to bet pretty polar, meaning like he's going to bet really nice, like higher end combos, probably top pair or better. I'm not saying he can't have a few combos that are less than top pair sprinkled in for some thinner value. But he's going to have like a lot of top pair or better. And then he's going to probably, in general, mix in like some draw, some air. So it's a spot where I don't think he's betting too often. Like, a really good player here is not going to not bet too often with a hand like 7-6 suited or pocket nines. Like, they're not going to waste their showdown value. They're not going to put themselves in a position to face check raise and then make a mistake either way, whether they call or fold. That's what a lot of you do. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So knowing that, I'm going to build my range in a pretty polar manner as well. Like, if I have hands here that have pretty good showdown value against his range, those would want to err on the side of check call. But how would I build my check raise range against this kind of opponent? So, of course, let's say my top ranges, let's say I did sprinkle in a few, excuse me, guys, like a few sets where I would have like pocket sevens, pocket fours. Let's say I did have some jack 7 suited sprinkling in there. Top of range, obviously, being like my 2 pairs or better. And then occasional top pair, but I don't have a lot of those. Remember, guys, I would have 3-bet a lot of those pre. So, my 2 pairs or better, can do some check raising here. And then obviously, like, you guys would think of these as bluffs, but I consider them more like your value, like your very strong combo draws, your flush draw plus straight draw hands. These are pushing so much equity that I consider these more value raises. So, like, this is coming from a PLO player. So, like, you have 9-8 of diamonds, you would have 6-5 of diamonds, 10-9 of diamonds, 10-8 of diamonds, maybe ace-4 of diamonds, for example. They're technically semi-bluffs, but I think they're just pushing so much equity, I would consider that part of your obvious value range, in my opinion. Now, going away from that, those are the easy those are the easy kind of combos to build as far as my value combos for my check raise range. I determined that we're going to go polar, meaning we're going on both ends of the spectrum. So let's skip past the middling stuff that we might check call with. What are the hands that I would use as a potential check raise here? And remember, guys, the worse the hand is, the more fold equity it's going to need. So let's say I have a hand like the hand that I showed in the very beginning. 6-5 of clubs is a hand that lacks showdown value. It's just the open ender. We do have the backdoor clubs. Like, could you sprinkle in some check calls here with a pretty good amount of equity? You can, certainly, but I would want to probably mix in some open enders here into my check raise range against a player like Tony. Other combos that are probably not strong enough to check call with, though. So like this one, you could argue check call. It's pretty close. But let's say we actually had a hand like the gutter, like 9-8 of hearts, right? This will be one that I don't feel real great about check calling this, but I think it's a really good check raise candidate. You have the ability to turn the nuts. You have the ability to continue barreling with some equity, especially if you had like 9-8 of clubs, really good candidate there, but obviously 9-8 of hearts still can fit. Still a bottom of the range combo that you could definitely consider. So you definitely start with like your most obvious draws. Excuse if you guys hear there's loud thunderstorm going on, so if you hear some thunder and lightning out there. But let's say, moving away from like the obvious draws, and like you could obviously, of course, mix in like some weaker flush draws that maybe don't want to check call at that point. I don't know, something like, or the 4 is kind of got showdown value. Let's say we, for some reason, defended with 6-3 of diamonds. It's also a combo draw. You guys get the idea. Like maybe some weaker flush draws. You sprinkle in some gutters, maybe some open enders. What are some other combos here to fill out our range? Because we're probably not acting aggressively enough against a good opponent like Tony here. So other combos I may use would sprinkle in like bottom pair and like a backdoor flush draw. So let's say we did have a hand like, not ace 4 clubs, because that is, let's say we had some of like the 4x, like if you do have a backdoor flush draw, but let's say we also had a hand like, you could even implement potentially, maybe not as often on this board because you can fill it out with enough like flush draws, straight draws, but sometimes you can include, let's say, a hand that, let's say you didn't 3-bet for some reason, you made like a little bit of a mistake pre-flop, but you could take a hand like 2 overs, backdoor open ender, backdoor clubs. You could use a hand like that. So it's giving you guys just a general idea. Like you can see where like I have my top end combos, my 2 pairs are better, and my really strong combo draws. And then I've got bottom of range hands like the straight draws, maybe some weaker flush draws. And then if I have the ability to take like bottom pair with some backdoors, like that's a pretty good candidate. And then you can fill it out with some other air that has future barreling potential, but also potentially, and I hate talking about blockers for live low stakes guys, but again, remember part 1 of this video here is talking about if I'm playing against like a really good opponent in theory. So like king queen does block like pocket kings, pocket queens, king jack, queen jack, and then it has those backdoor opportunities to barrel when we pick up equity. So that's why I threw in that combo just in case you didn't 3-bet it for some reason. Now, the middle of range combos that are pretty good check calls, like we're going to obviously have a lot of like weaker top pair here, guys, that we didn't 3-bet. I probably would 3-bet some jack 10 suited, but let's say I did have jack 10 suited. So like a lot of your weaker jack X, and then I think showdown value, you guys play those hands pretty well, whether it's on purpose or by accident. Like your pocket 9s, 8s, your 7X, pocket 6s, like a lot of those pocket pairs and middling pair hands. And then again, for balance against a player like Tony, I wouldn't want to always check raise all of my draws. So like draws that maybe have a little more equity or showdown value possibly to them. Like if I did have a hand like, let's say, I mean, I shouldn't have this hand, guys, but let's say I had like ace king of diamonds. Like that hand actually has a fair amount of showdown value. Like it's a pretty good check call candidate compared to a hand. I'll show you for visual purposes. Like it looks strong, but like the ace and the king, like if you turn top pair, it's likely the best top pair. It's likely the best hand now anyway. There's a lot of showdown value. I would actually rather check call ace king of diamonds than say ace 3 of diamonds. It lacks a little more showdown value. And then you do have kind of the backdoor gutter here with the ace 3-4, the 7-4-3 as well. So that's, this would be like, again, like more middling stuff that you could have the kind of equity where like you can get away with check calls. Like the open ender's fine to not check raise. You have some flush draws you mix in there, and then a lot of like the weaker top pair and middling pair hands. pretty easy, right? That's an easy way to build your range, guys. I took top of range and then good bottom of range candidates, and I decided to put those into my check raise range. My check call range is filled out by the rest of these kind of combos in general. Now, against a player like Tony, or a really good player here, guys, I would want to make sure that every now and then I do actually include like a fair amount of top pair, but I actually sometimes also, believe it or not, depending on stack depth, like I would like to include maybe a few big hands just to sprinkle in there, but it's very rare. It's just so that, we don't check calls so capped all the time, and our opponent can't just barrel us off of his off our range. So we do want to mix in just every now and then, in my opinion, like kind of exploitively against even the guys that we need just mostly balance against. I would include some top end combos. Now, a lot of players will say, like, well, the Solver says, like, a lot of, like, the top pair combos take care of that. Like, you'll be able to call down a top pair. But, if we don't have as many of those, like, I still like to be able to show up with some of, like, the two pairs and sets just every now and then. It's just an easy way to kind of, again, build your range. Again, top of range, bottom of range, like to check raise. Middle of range kind of likes to check call. Then you maybe mix in a few bigger hands just to make sure middle of range isn't so capped, in my opinion. Now, having said that, excuse me, guys, let's say allergies are kind of tickling the throat here. So let's say that our opponent, though, is your typical recreational player, right? And you're going to see a lot of half pot bets, or you're going to see much larger bets. They like to differentiate their ranges and their sizings based on their hand strength. So over at Art City Poker, the best way that we like to go about it is against like the smaller stabs, especially from a wider range. We actually like to take so many more hands in our range. Wow, that was a really loud lightning strike. We like to take so many more of our hands in our range and check raise them, especially in a really deep environment like this for really large, because they play so poorly against a really large check raise. So let's say he bets 15. Let's say we did raise to something like 100 guys. And you could go even larger than this, as deep as we are. But against what we think is, now it doesn't mean he's necessarily like he's more capped or he's just wider. It doesn't mean that he bets small here and he can't have like some top pair of better hands. But half pot is kind of like a general stab sizing from the population. He's going to have a lot of those hands that I said a good player like Tony would not have. Like he's going to bet for protection because he's afraid of like playing runouts. Like they're going to bet hands like 7-6 here. They're going to bet hands like pocket eights. They're going to stab with too much air. And so this is a really good spot to check raise really wide with his hands as weak as we talked about, like the gutters. Like you could take a hand if you did, I don't like when it's reversed like that. If you did take a hand like 6-3 of spades, a hand as weak as this gutter, any draws, guys, any flush draws, any straight draws, you can take even like some bottom pair hands that have some kind of backdoor potential. We're basically attacking a really wide stab. These guys are stabbing too wide and not polar enough, right? Now, if he increased his sizing, instead of 15, let's say they bet 25, 5 Redbirds or whatever. To me, this signifies strength. These guys are not doing this with hands generally like pocket sixes or fives. If they are, and you find that out, it's a really good spot to attack. But generally speaking, like they're going to bet closer to pot, guys, or at least like 2/3 or more when they have more strength and they feel comfortable with hands like top pair or better and like nutty draws. So in this instance, we only again, the more or the stronger that your opponent is telling you that they are, the more fold equity you're going to need to make your play profitable. So against the larger sizing, I would only take my very top of range type of value hands and I would bluff those, but I would include, like, to me now, this 9-8 of diamonds, this combo draw that I showed you guys before, this shifts more to like basically our semi-bluff. Against like a balanced player, I consider it more part of our value range. It's kind of merged between like value, really high equity, semi-bluff. Against a really strong, transparent range, though, the only bluffs we would want to have here, guys, are like the really strong combo draws, like 9-8 of diamonds, ace-4 of diamonds, 10-9 of diamonds, 10-8 of diamonds. Even like, guys, even I showed like ace-king of diamonds, I wouldn't want to actually check raise against the large sizing here because it's pushing like a decent amount of equity, but I would need the additional equity, in my opinion, in the form of like trips or two pairs outs or straight outs. I don't have that with ace-king of diamonds compared to like ace-4 of diamonds. So this is a spot where we want to take combo draws and then the obvious top of range hands like two pairs or better, and we want to attack. So you guys can see that like part two, it didn't really take all that long. Like It's very simple. If our opponent stabs small, and especially if heads up, if you're multi-way, their sizings definitely tend to be even more transparent, but you gotta be careful multi-way because they won't usually be willing to bet quite as wide. Some players will, and those are really good spots to take notes about of that and then attack. But generally speaking, like they're gonna bet smaller when they're not as comfortable or confident in their hand strength, and they're gonna bet larger when they're more confident and comfortable. So we attack much wider when they bet smaller. We have the green light to do that. When they bet really large, it's kind of a red flag, red light situation. We only want to attack with very high equity combos, top of range value, top of range like semi bluffs. Otherwise, you're going to mix in more check calls and then more folds against the larger size. And so you can see how when we talked about the how do we deviate and how do we switch our strategy as far as building like our range here, especially our check raise range against a recreational player or a fish compared to a player like Tony or like a professional or a really good thinking player. We are going exploitively based on their sizings because a player like Tony or a good player is going to balance their bet. They're going to bet with one probably sizing there, and they're going to balance it pretty well. They're going to have really good combos. They'll have some bad combos, but they're not going to overextend with a lot of the middling stuff. They're going to play position. They're going to check back with some balance as well. Like Tony's not going to check back with less than top pair every time, guys. Like he'll check back with like some top pair. He'll check back with some bigger draws there just so he can have them in his range. When you do get flush or straight completed runouts, when you do get a board pair, top pair type of situation where like the Jack of Hearts comes in the turn, like Tony's not going to check back there without having a Jack some of the time so that he can show up with trips or better, guys. Most recreational players, most of you guys that are watching this video don't think like that. You think like I have top pair, I bet top pair. That's why we can put you in a world of hurt with these wide check raise ranges. There's sizing tells like I mentioned. So building your range is not all that complicated. Especially in the low stakes games. But I wanted to show you guys how it differs from building it building it in theory with balance against a really good player versus building it exploitatively against live low stakes recreational players. There is a difference. It's simplified. That's what we do over at archcitypoker.com is we like to simplify the process and make your strategy really easy to implement right away. So if you guys have any questions or comments, apologies for the allergies and the couple of the coughs. Apologies for the thunderstorm if you heard any of that. But this was the best time for me to be able to record this today. So if there are any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section as usual on this platform. Come on over to the Discord. You can definitely get more detailed answers there as well, where we implore players to come and build that community where you guys can all communicate with each other there as well. So again, any questions or comments, go ahead and let us know. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks.